all right, guys, just give me about 30 minutes or whatever not. I'm going to disappear. But sit back a minute, just chill for a minute, then I'm going to come out again. Okay. Like I'm doing my job and shit like that. I'm looking at you guys crazy. Yeah. Pay no attention. Just bob your head and go with it.
Fuck yeah, Zion. Slappy crook, I could try that. Right down. Goggle, baby. Come on, man, with the old guy with the mask, that was fucking hilarious.
Fuck, I did it the shit out of me, man. Sorry, we got it.
Fucking legend.
Alright? Yeah.
Thrashed. Oh, that's not Joey. It looks like Joey.
We decided to park the van here.
Elijah's about to get down, like he always does. He's been blowing me away, man.
Get my back. I got a belly full of noodles and it's raining. Definitely skim the table. That much closer to Turtle's Edge.
That's you?
There you go. Fan them out, baby. Fan them out.
That was like the vamp maneuver, right?
One, two, three. Thrasher's happy. Did it. I love that. Thrasher's happy. Everyone's happy.
To all my friends present, past and beyond, especially those who weren't with us too long. Life is the most precious thing you can lose. While you were here, the fun was never ending. Like a minute was only beginning. Captain Coleman, nickel, this one's for you! Never get down, feeling you can go on. Just remember, society is a cheer on. You want you again. Remember when he told you he was about to Benjamins? You act like you ain't him, but give him a little trim to begin. Now you think you really gon' pretend like you wasn't down and you called him again. Plus when you give it up so easy, you ain't even fooling him. If you did it then you probably can. Talking out your neck saying you're a Christian, a Muslim, sleeping with the gin. Now that is the sin that did Jezebel in. Who you gonna tell when the repercussions spin? Showing off your ass cause you thinking it's a trend, girlfriend. Let me break it down for you again. You know I only said cause I'm truly genuine. Don't be a hard rock when you really are a gem, baby girl. Respect is just the minimum. Nigga, you still defending them now. Lauren is only human. You don't think I haven't been through the same predicament. Let it sit inside your head like a million women in Philly pen. It's silly when girls sell their souls because it's sin. Look at where you be in. Hair weaves like Europeans. Fake nails to rock the bands. Come again. Yeah. A win-win. Come again. A win-win. Come again. A win-win. Come again. Yeah, guys, you know you better watch out. Some girls are only about that thing, that thing, that thing, that thing.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Kevin Griffin's Golden Boy.
If them hoes ever said shit, we can get it poppin'. I'm too focused on the bread, bitch, and you just pocket watchin'. Let them broke bitches gossip, cause ain't no way I'm stopping. Never been a scared bitch, you know how I'm rockin'. If them hoes ever said shit, we can get it poppin'. I'm focused on the bread, bitch, and you just pocket watchin'. Let them broke bitches gossip, cause ain't no way I'm stopping. Never been a scared bitch, bitches really got the right one. I don't care who you are, JT gon' shake some. Bitch, don't do fun. Loud bitch with no fun. Bitches really tryna knock us off, but any girls up on they run. They see my game, yeah, what's poppin', what's good? Like silver spoon, bitches actin' all hood. Keep a hug on my face, cause I wish a bitch would. See me in and this shit in these bitches lookin' good. Been a scared bitch, you know how I'm rockin'. If them hoes ever said shit, we can get it poppin'. I'm too focused on the bread, bitch, and you just pocket watchin'. Let them broke bitches gossip, cause ain't no way I'm stopping. Never been a scared bitch, you know how I'm rockin'. If them hoes ever said shit, we can get it poppin'. I'm too focused on the bread, bitch, and you just pocket watchin'. Let them broke bitches gossip, cause ain't no way I'm stopping. Never been a scared bitch, scared bitch, scared bitch, scared bitch.
Thrasher. On Thrasher. That was a good part.
No mames, saca el mejor librado, culeros. ¡Ya, huevo! God!
I'm just gonna fucking roll down the fucking hill. Keep it aesthetic.
Salud. México City. Viva México, cabrones.
Ya no firme, ¿no, amigo? Amigo, ya no firme, nada más.
Hey everyone, this is Adam Mellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. Today, we are going to take a look at the fact that this upcoming solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, which is happening on April 8th, is also happening in a conjunction with Chiron. Now, you guys who watch my channel know that I'm not someone who really brings asteroids into the picture so often. In fact, I can probably think of maybe 5 or 6 times dating all the way back to the start of my YouTube channel that I've really spent time talking about Chiron or any of the other asteroids. Although I have frequently entertained guests at the Nightlight Astrology School, guest speakers on the topics of the asteroids, they've not been a big part of my practice. And I tend to have little rants that I go on about the overuse of asteroids. And I have some reasons that they sometimes bother me. It sometimes create the impression that I'm anti-asteroid. Anti-asteroid Adam. But anyway, I'm not. And we're going to talk today about what to look for or what it might mean that Chiron is engaged at the heart of this solar eclipse in Aries next month. And I think this will be useful because I've had a lot of people asking about this. And one of the things that is, quite common really is for those planets that are conjoined to any eclipse, lunar or solar, to play a really big role in the expression of the archetypes of that eclipse. And so why would we just completely ignore Chiron? A number of people have asked me that question, but like, are you just going to ignore it? No, I think it probably is important. But today, anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I think of and use asteroids. I'm going to tell you about some of the major Chiron and Aries significations. And then we'll have a separate video. We're doing a number of horoscopes and further treatment on the solar eclipse in Aries closer to the April 8th eclipse, at which point we will talk more about the specific ways in which Chiron and Aries may engage with the eclipse through horoscopes. Okay, so today we're just going to talk about the archetype of Chiron and Aries at the eclipse and what it might mean, and I'll tell you my thoughts on, try to clarify my thoughts on asteroids. Okay, anyway, that's our agenda for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Find a unique way of impressing your soul on the like button. And when you share your comments and reflections, tell me something about Chiron that I don't know. I would love to hear more about your experiences with Chiron, even though it is not my forte. I would love to hear more from you guys. You can find a transcript of any of my daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Guess what? Tonight, there is a special event happening, which I invite you to join me for, and that is a live webinar that I am giving on the topic of Neptune in love and relationships. If you go to my website, nightlightastrology.com, click on the events tab and go to live talks, you'll be taken over to a page that where you can register for Neptune in Love. It's Thursday, March 14th. It's 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. When you register, you'll get a link. Chiron, I've been a professional astrologer for 14 years, have read most of the major books written about Chiron from modern astrologers, have been to multiple lectures, have, tracked Chiron here and there with some interest. But anyway, here it is. So we have that solar eclipse forming at about 19 Aries, and you will see that it is, it's happening like bang on, just exacto. So let's actually advance this by some hours so we can see when the planets all get together. You're going to see that, and actually if I can do it by minutes, they are exactly conjoined down to the degree and the minute of the degree. Look at that. So when it was brought to my attention, because I don't usually even include Chiron in my charts, right? It's an object, it's a symbol in my toolkit that I rarely ever use. And that does not mean that I think that it's bogus or something like that, but it's just not one that I use very often. So a friend of mine, Alex Amorosi, in fact, my colleague, who comes on, he was like, have you been thinking about this Chiron conjunction at the solar eclipse in Aries? And I was like, really? I'm just being honest with you guys. I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And certainly started, from that point on, started thinking about it. Okay, well, gotta look at this. So anyway, I thought that this would be a fun thing to talk about, but because you guys are like, what? An asteroid? First, let me tell you how I think about or use asteroids. If I ever do. So I have to say, first of all, that it's not. There is no part of me that thinks that Chiron is. Well, I shouldn't, because I was born with Chiron on my ascendant within, I think it's about a degree. So I have Chiron natally conjoined to my ascendant in Taurus. So there have been many occasions um, where I've had the opportunity to reflect on Chiron as an archetype that's been very active in my own life. The archetype of the wounded healer, which is the simplest way that you'll hear Chiron talked about. Chiron was a centaur in Greek mythology who was known as an incredible teacher to many heroes. Chiron was skilled in things like medicine and warfare and astrology and astronomy. Chiron also suffers an incurable wound and sort of trades his life in a swap with the situation that Prometheus finds himself in. So there's a kind of Christ-like side to Chiron that's very interesting, and a teacherly side and an educated side. There's a bit of an outcast in Chiron. That's part of his story with his mother. There are, excuse me, there are many significations that have to do with wounding and healing and education and wisdom in not just the healing arts, but also military arts and something like astrology and astronomy. So, as someone who, while I was coming of age, utilized a magic potion, an entheogen from South America to heal some family wounds and problems that I had with addiction, and then started through those experiences studying astrology and sacred astronomy, you might say. I can certainly, the archetype has been active in my own life, right? It's on my ascendant, literally. So my problem with asteroids is the same problem that I have with hermetic lots, or the same problem that I have with fixed stars, or the same problem that I have with minor aspects. It is not about the relevancy or the potency or the validity of any of these subjects or symbols. I am someone, and this is just the way that I work as an astrologer and the way that I teach. I don't like to clutter my chart with too many things. I feel like there's this kind of an idea that I just disagree with, which is that more symbols in the chart means more truth. Like, you don't have an objective chart unless you have every single thing listed. I'm someone who's just really, just gone kind of, I've been a contrarian when it comes to that idea, because, I took an entire year plus to remove the outer planets from my chart from all charts I was working with when I started studying Hellenistic astrology, as a way of developing an understanding of the traditional planets that were not being colored or influenced by the outers. And what I discovered in that process was that there was nothing missing. There was nothing lacking. That doesn't mean that the outer planets don't have unique things to say, or that they aren't really powerful and important. And I use them every day in my practice now. But taking that time and pulling certain symbols out of the chart really taught me that it's not more symbols that leads to a more objective truth. And that is part and parcel of my view that astrology is a form of divination. So the way that I look at astrology is sort of like this. If I had to make an analogy with the tarot, I would say I think you could do successful divination just using the major arcana, or just using one suit of cards if you wanted to. That doesn't mean that using all of the cards is a bad thing either. You could use all of them, you could use a few of them. In fact, I believe that the similar idea would be like saying, I don't believe you have to use astrology, tarot, and I Ching all at once. You could use them, and I often do. But it's also not lacking. You're not lacking anything. You're not missing anything necessarily. There's not some kind of, it's not like you're symbolically impoverished unless you're using all three systems at once. So that being said, I think that there are some people for whom using things like hermetic lots, fixed stars, minor aspects, asteroids, etc., trans-Neptunian objects, whatever, is like really appealing and really works. And the multiplicity of symbols, it works with your brain. It works with the kind of symbolic diviner that you are. And that's fine. That's a good thing, right? What I resist is the kind of modern astrological tendency to think I don't have a complete set of facts about this person. I don't have a complete readout unless I include 30 extra objects, right? So that's the thing that I kind of push back against. I say symbols are, you know, there's the sky will speak about what's going on in a reading. Like when I sit down with a client, I have seen, so many different symbols speak and so many different techniques speak over time and so many different systems of divination that speak over time in my life and other people's lives, that I just assume that it's not the symbols are the means by which the oracle speaks, and the oracle can speak to things very specifically, very powerfully, with direction and intelligence and predictive power or descriptive power or guidance and instruction, using a really vast diverse set of symbols or a really limited and focused set of symbols. So because that's the way I think about things, I resist this tendency that I feel like, we have to throw a ton of stuff into a chart. Because what I've seen is that for a lot of people, and I'm just being honest, you don't have to agree with me, for a lot of people, the overuse of symbols, using too many, is sort of like constantly flipping cards in the tarot, or recasting the I Ching when you don't get an answer you like. There's a way in which we use so many symbols, we can kind of get the chart to say whatever we want. And I like having to work within a somewhat narrower set of symbols to discover nuance and subtlety and interpenetrating symbolic relationships and commentaries that the symbols have with one another, which I feel becomes harder to do, at least for my brain, the more symbols are present. And if you're like a galaxy brain and you can do that, then fantastic, right? So it's not that I don't think that those symbols can speak. It's that I wonder why we think we need so many all the time. And I also wonder if it doesn't betray something of an empirical, an unconscious empirical mindset. It's not objective unless it includes and accounts for every last thing in the sky. Well, good luck. There's thousands. You know what I mean? So I think of asteroids as divinatory exclamation points, or like little divinatory add-ons. Like my main set of symbols are the traditional 7 and the outer planets. And that's not to say that I think those are the only good ones or those are the best ones. But the way that I use fixed stars, the way that I use hermetic lots, the way that I use Sabian symbols, the way that I use anything like that, including asteroids like Chiron, is if and when they appear really strongly in something that I'm looking at, like this eclipse. Oh my God, it is exactly conjoined down to the degree and the minute. Well, to me, there's ways in which, if you just like, often one of the things that I'll do is when I'm looking at my chart, I will, not really with the asteroids, but for me it's the fixed stars, which I think are like ancient version of the asteroids. Honestly, I think the ancient world, like the modern world, was always looking for and noticing different kinds of symbols in the stars and in the solar system. Well, when I notice that something is configured to Arcturus or Vega or Aldebaran or Algol or something like that, that's my asteroid practice, basically. And it's been developing slowly over time. And the reason it's been developing slowly over time is that I feel like I like to get to know symbols and develop a relationship with them. So I often track them in my personal life before I introduce them to clients or to YouTube. I just need a feel and a relationship with these symbols. What I don't like, what I resist, is that kind of modern tendency to be like, okay, here's what so-and-so said about Chiron. Here's what so-and-so said about Sedna or, Eris or whatever it is. And now I'm just going to throw it into every chart that I look at and immediately feign like I have some understanding, like it's just as simple as a list of adjectives that I can slap into a chart in a reading. So the other thing that I'm opposed to is people just slapping tons of things into charts without slowly, carefully developing relationships with the symbols, because the symbols were thought of in ancient astrology as the omens of the gods. Like they are, it's like a vernacular you're learning, or it's like going in and learning a specific dialect within a different region of the jungle or something. You to me, the inclusion of asteroids, like if there's any asteroid that I was going to really start including, it probably would be Chiron, because Chiron is on my ascendant, and I have had numerous occasions to contemplate Chiron's presence in my own psychology, right? So and so any rate, all of this is just to say that this is how I think of and use asteroids. I think that that doesn't mean that there isn't room for people to use them very differently than myself, or have different ideas or opinions about them. But there's this misconception that I hate asteroids. I've seen this like around in the YouTube comments and like social media, like Adam the asteroid hater. And I don't. I think it's funny when someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I had a death and rebirth experience and it was because of Vesta." And I'm like, okay, maybe it is. Maybe it is because of Vesta, or or like whatever other Juno or something. Okay, have you looked at the possibility that Pluto is conjoining your sun right now, right? And I'm not saying that both can't be true. It's just that sometimes I feel like we are so easily bored and lack focus, and we don't take the time to develop relationships with deep relationships with simple things like signs, houses, planets. And the more we do, the more we will find that, like, for example, I do this in my second year class all the time as we reintroduce the outer planets into the curriculum after taking them out in year one, just to get to know the ancient framework on its own terms. Year two, we bring them back in. And what I have people do is I have people look at a placement in the natal chart. Like, let's say, okay, you had a really difficult mother, and so we look, and in the natal chart, we find that the moon is in Scorpio in the 12th house. Oh wow, that's there it is, right? There's a one placement that could be representing a difficult mom relationship, a fallen moon in Scorpio in the 12th house. All right. And then we bring in the outer planets, and suddenly we discover that Pluto was also square to the moon when you were born. So my point is always, you see how the outer planet accents, highlights, augments the same exact delineation. And that's not to say that it doesn't also add its own unique flavor or depth or significations from some other part of the chart. It's just to say that often what you'll find is that if you take the time to get to know houses, signs, dignities, etc., there's multiple ways of getting to the same place in charts always. There are always, like, you'll hear astrologers, in fact, talk about the rule of three. If you see the same thing in the chart 3 times, you really know it's a thing. My point is that it's a mistake to think that more symbols gets you to the truth. It doesn't always. And that's also not to say that more symbols means that all of the other stuff is irrelevant compared to just these things that I think are important. So anyway, I hope that I don't know, I hope it's interesting to hear what I think about asteroids, how I use them, or I really don't use them. But if I were going to use them, it'd be much like fixed stars, which is something that augments, enhances, highlights, deepens, qualifies, but they're not primary. And that's mostly due to the way that I need to focus and deeply develop relationships with simpler things and then gradually expand. For example, I've been studying Hellenistic astrology and teaching it for a long time now. It's only in the past year or so that I really started incorporating the bounds, a little bit of the decans, and a little bit of fixed stars. And that was deliberate on my part. If you've been in any of my programs and people would be like, well, why aren't you teaching this? I'd be like, because I haven't developed a relationship with these things yet. And it's very important for me to have living experience starting to work with them outside of clients and YouTube. And then as I get to know them, as I feel like I have a relationship with them, I can start including them. At the very least, that's what I encourage people to do with anything, whether it's a Sabian symbol or an asteroid or a hermetic lot or a fixed star or anything. And don't underestimate the power of getting to know the signs, planets, and houses and dignities very, very deeply as a kind of first step. That's my advice, but take it or leave it. All right, now that I have gone on my soapbox and, hopefully that was interesting, let's talk about Chiron and Aries and some of the significations that may come up. I'm keeping this simple, although, again, I'm not a Chiron expert. It's not something that I use in my practice all the time. There are some very simple things that you could say about Chiron and Aries and the significations that Chiron and Aries is likely to bring to the eclipse being at the exact heart of the sun at the time. It's like a Chiron Kazemi, even though with 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 objects like asteroids and outer planets, is it appropriate to say that they're Kazemi? I don't know, but at any rate, it's at the heart of the sun, an exact conjunction on a solar eclipse. I mean, that is something, right? So, what do we think? Number one. So, the one thing that I would say is pay attention to the dignities always. So, Chiron is in Aries, which is the temple of Mars and the exaltation of the sun. It's a fire sign, it's masculine, it's a sign of the vernal equinox. And a sign with Chiron that may incline Chiron toward things like healing or lessons in the martial arts. So this might have something to do, for example, with, I mean, quite literally, could be Chiron and Aries could engage you in learning something about warfare, self-defense, weapons training, hunting, like anything that's literally about learning more or becoming educated somehow in any kind of martial art would fit for Chiron and Aries. The other thing, though, that could come up very easily would be lessons or healing in the martial arts that have to do with psychological qualities that are related to Mars. For example, the building or development of confidence or strength or power or courage, all of which might have to be developed or cultivated through this eclipse and the cycle of karma that is coming off from the eclipse because you lack confidence or you lack courage or you tend to be afraid or you underestimate yourself or you're not sure you're that strong, right? So this could be the Chiron signification to me at the heart of Aries is not totally different, by the way, from a solar eclipse in Aries. And this is my point, where it just sort of augments or amplifies some of the same themes that Aries tends to be about, like the building and development of confidence, assertiveness, strength, power, martial, any kind of martial influence, Mars influence. And there could also be healing involved around these things or the exploration of wounds in relation to these things. So that would be the very first thing that I would look at, would just be like, for example, getting a personal trainer, taking a course on exercise or nutrition that comes with an increased feeling of vitality, addressing lack of confidence, developing strength and potency, all of those kinds of healings or learnings or lessons around martial things could be really amplified by this eclipse. Number two would be wounds or healing in the domain of Aries. So were you picked on? Were you bullied? Do you have deep wounds around self-confidence or self-esteem, which Aries, again, as a sign, tends to amplify the importance of? Whether you have the sun there or any planet there, one of the things that's often connected to the sign of Aries is the sense of becoming stronger, becoming more confident, rising up, facing challenges, sometimes even having to overcome oppressive or tyrannical forces that feel like they're trying to push you down, that you have to stand up to. These are Aries themes. Surviving, that's an Aries theme. And thriving, because you've found your potency. But there are wounds in these areas for us. We tried that once and someone abused us. We tried to be strong at some point, but I don't know, you were on a trajectory. I remember when I was in college, I was on a trajectory I played club lacrosse and broke my arm, and then I couldn't play. I was trying to be a competitive athlete in college, but I got derailed by an injury. See, we all have wounds in this area of life where we tried to develop strength and fell short, or our confidence was totaled by someone abusive. So, what are the wounds? What is the necessary healing in the sign that has to do with freedom, potency, strength of individuality, a sense of being able to overcome, persist, and survive difficult things through inner strength? Where are our wounds at in these specific areas in our life? Like biographically, where have they occurred? How are we still living with them? And then simultaneously, what healing might start to present itself or come through as a result of this eclipse having such a close conjunction with Chiron, who's an educator and a healer, and may amplify the importance of dealing with these wounds and bringing healing to them. All right. Okay, so number 3 would be to focus on healing lessons, wounds, and the healing of the wounds. So learning or lessons in the healing or martial arts, some kind of Aryan level of knowledge, wisdom, or understanding, maybe that has to do with healing others or healing ourselves. Sorry, this was a little redundant. So, and then the other thing would be healings in the topical places or houses of Aries in the natal chart. So the other thing you have to keep in mind is that in addition to the significations of Mars and Aries, a kind of martial Chiron element, we also have the whole sign houses. So when you're thinking about the first house, it might be body. When you're thinking about the second house, some of these lessons are also related to the development of resources, money, etc. When you're thinking about it in the fourth house, you're thinking about home and family, right? Seventh, it's marriage. 10th, it's maybe your career. So the topical area that this eclipse is located in, the Aries whole sign house of your birth chart, is also the topical area that will be brought up for review. So that is what we're going to be looking at when we get to horoscopes, because that requires kind of going through all 12 whole sign houses, which Alex and I have recorded already for April. So we'll be doing that, and Alex will be adding his thoughts about that as someone who also works with Chiron a bit more than I do. My only claim to Chiron expertise is that it's on my ascendant. Well, conscious or unconscious, it's been part of my life. Now, the other thing that I would say here is that, remember, with eclipses, the healing, the learning, the education, the dealing with wounds in the Aries martial dimension of life, or the topical area of your birth chart occupied by Aries, does not happen all at once. A solar eclipse is the start of something new. And in time, that seed that's being planted will lead to the healing, the wisdom, the addressing of wounds, the insights that come from looking deeply at our wounds and having to learn and grow because of them. In many ways, people will always associate Chiron with the development of the knowledge or wisdom, and then the expertise that may also be cultivated due to the specific nature of the wound that you have. So, if your confidence has been wounded and you're entering into a cycle in which you may be developing it and strengthening your sense of individual power and courage in a healthy way, not an egotistical way, maybe there's some way in which that exact healing process will lead to your using that understanding in some kind of service or some other ability or skill or career path. For example, when you have to face the feeling of, I don't know, not being worthy or not being strong or lacking confidence or lacking a sense of individual strength and freedom, all Aries themes that maybe are somewhat difficult to, like, there's been some wounds around those things. If that's the case, let me just do this really quick. If that's the case, then could you end up through the healing of these specific issues, could you end up coaching other people, or could you end up having some leadership qualities that are now available to be used in some other area of your life? See that? And now the reason one of the things I don't like about the way people talk about Chiron, because people talk this way about everything in astrology. Oh, you've been through a Pluto transit and it required a lot of inner work. Oh, great, now you're a shaman, something like that. Hate that kind of thinking. It's like, just because you've grown doesn't mean you have to turn it into something that you're monetizing, But just because you've gone through something doesn't necessarily, not for everyone, does it mean that you're going to become a professional healer because you've had to do some healing. And I think there's sort of a stereotype about that with all astrological transits. But Chiron to me is sometimes the poster child for thinking that pain or difficulty suddenly, if you've gone through it and done some good work with it, that suddenly it gives you a platform of expertise, or that you should monetize it or make a career or platform for yourself based on it. Some people will. Some people, their life will be called in that way. For a lot of people, though, the healing is meant to open other kinds of doors, and it won't be directly related to something you end up doing for a living, if that makes sense. So that is it for today. That's what I have to offer you guys. I hope that this was useful. And yeah, tell me your thoughts about asteroids. How do you use them? Do you use them at all? Do you not use them? Which ones have you found useful? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. What else do you think Chiron and Aries may signify? I am, not the world's most qualified person again when it comes to talking about Chiron. So add in your own thoughts and enrich this conversation in the chat box. I'd love to hear from you guys. All right, that's it for today. If you stick around, you'll hear that interview with Ashley about her upcoming herbal apprenticeship. Otherwise, I hope you guys are having a great day. And don't forget that tonight is the Neptune webinar. If you want to attend, pop over to nightlightastrology.com, go to the live events tab, click on the Neptune in Love talk, and you can register and come join us. All right, that's it. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for sticking around. I'm really happy to be joined by my wife, Ashley, who is an herbalist. Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
And yeah, I'm really excited to be helping Ashley promote her upcoming program, which is something that you actually began teaching many years ago, this herbal apprenticeship program. I think it was 2011 or 12 that it got started, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been over 10 years I've been offering this course, and yeah, it's my favorite thing to teach.
Yeah. And just to be clear, because some people on my channel, most people know you because you pop on here or there. We talk about herbs and astrology. There's an attraction in our marriage and an attraction in the subject matter that is old. Like we've been together for 14 years in our relationship going on, and we've always had a fascination with each other's areas of expertise, and we've done lots. Hey everyone, this is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. I am out of town for the day. I know that you guys will enjoy the content that I have this week lined up while I'm out of town, and they will.
We are going to talk today a little bit about Mercury's retrograde in Aries and Mercury's interface with Chiron, 3 conjunctions with Chiron over the course of that retrograde cycle. So we'll get to that. But before I forget, if you're interested in learning more about Adam's work, you can go to www.nightlightastrology.com. You can get information on Adam's readings and classes there. Remember to do whatever feels right to you with the like button, because I didn't realize until I saw on Adam's Instagram that there was some like button contest going on. So you do you, and whatever happens with the like button in you is your business. Remember to like and subscribe. You can also get information on Adam's wife Ashley's herbal apprenticeship. She's a phenomenal herbalist at www.skyhouseherbs.com. If you're interested in my work, working with me or learning more about me, you can go to www.alexamorosi.com. There you can find all the information on my readings, my different services. I am not just an astrologer. I actually, for much longer than I've been an astrologer, been an intuit and energy worker and a yoga teacher as well. And I offer a service that's been very popular lately of combining my intuitive readings with astrology readings. So I kind of, we look at your chart and then I tell you about my hits, and then we look at your chart and I tell you about my hits, and we kind of go back and forth between the two. It can be really, really powerful and just a lot of fun detective work. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Chiron. Chiron is a planetoid that orbits between Saturn and Uranus. It was discovered in the 70s, and it has about a 50-year orbital cycle. And I use in my readings, I use the Hellenistic system in my readings for the chart construction, whole sign houses, and the ancient rulerships, but I also use asteroids and Chiron. Not all the time, but when there's a significant transit, there's a significant conjunction, there's a repeated square or hard aspect, I will definitely take a look at it because I think that those points can add some specificity to the reading. Though I tend to use mostly, the planets and Pluto, and the nodes. But Chiron is very, very activated over the course of the next 6 weeks. Chiron is intimately tied to the April 8th solar eclipse, which is happening at 19 degrees of Aries, where Chiron will be. And it's actually the thing that really struck me is how powerful it would be. Is it's to the minute conjunct. So the sun, the moon, and Chiron will all be at 1924 of Aries during the eclipse. That's a pretty rare and powerful event. The sun will conjunct Chiron every year. The moon obviously conjuncts Chiron every month. But there's to have all three on an eclipse right next to the North Node, Mercury retrograding back into the mix, Mars coming into a conjunction with Saturn and Pisces at the same time. There's a lot baked into this. That's one of the reasons that I think you're going to hear a lot about this eclipse. It's not just because it's a total solar eclipse, but there are a lot of moving parts in and around of and related to this eclipse. So the Mercury retrograde point of view we're going to take today is just a couple of things you might look for with Chiron. Mercury and Chiron together will work in Aries there too. And we'll look at some things to watch for. I find the best way to learn astrology is to know what transits are happening and be observant to yourself and observant of your life and see what's going on. And then as you're taking note of that, you start to notice the correlations. And it can be a very, very powerful way to sort of internalize and humanize the transits, because it can be very easy to say, like, oh, it's the language of the stars, but it's talking about very human things. So let's bring up the chart. Let's look at Mercury's first conjunction. So you'll see I've made an equinox video while Adam's away too that you'll see that I've made. And so I talk a little bit about this in that video as well. But right around the equinox, just as the sun moves into Aries, here's Mercury at 17 degrees Aries. Here's Chiron at 18 degrees Aries. Mercury's moving into conjunction, passes that conjunction around March 20th. Now Mercury's going to dance all the way up to 27 Aries, and then you'll see the station retrograde, and now Mercury is moving back, and here's Mercury starting to make its conjunction with the sun, the Cazimi moment. So that's around April 11th. And then Mercury is now moving back into conjunction with Chiron at 19 of Aries, and that's about April 15th. Then Mercury is going to get all the way back to 15 and change of Aries, where it will, God love him, is going to station. Wait, did I miss that? I missed the station. Sorry. Go back. Wait. There we go. There's Mercury stationing at 15. Just barely gets back to 15 Aries, 15, 59 Aries.
Very nice.
And then Mercury starts to go forward and makes this last conjunction with Chiron and Aries by May 5th, and then Mercury will move into Taurus on May 15th. So 3 big conjunctions, and particularly strong, I think, is that Cazimi moment with the sun, and then Mercury wedged between the sun and Chiron just after the exalted sun has been eclipsed. I'm not going to get into all of that today. I'm going to stay mostly with Mercury and Chiron. You're going to see a lot of content on this eclipse. No matter what astrology content you follow, you're going to see a lot of content on that. And so I'm going to stick more with Mercury and Chiron today, a little bit about the archetype of Chiron as I've come to understand it in practice. And in my life, Chiron actually is directly conjunct my midheaven. And then we'll talk a little bit about some things you might notice or watch for, or themes that are coming up very strongly. So Chiron generally has to do with a wound that doesn't quite heal. We have all, in some way, had what's called a core wound, something that was very deep, from this lifetime or another, and has stayed with us. And sometimes that wound is something that we have to learn how to live with and relate to. We have to learn how to create a sense of meaning around it sometimes in order to relate to it. Sometimes we learn to create a more generative energy around the wound rather than a destructive energy around the wound. I mean, I know for myself, the trauma in the wounds that I have gone through have, when wasn't aware of them particularly, they run your life, and you don't even know that they're running your life. And so Chiron is about how we begin to learn to relate to, tend to um, be tender with the wounds that we have, and then how we share what we've learned with others, which is a very, very important part of the archetype of Chiron. Um, there's a wise teacher in Chiron. Chiron also was a teacher of philosophy and medicine, many other sort of Renaissance kind of arts, and was the teacher of Achilles too. And I talk a little bit about in the Equinox video how he was as he learned to heal, he became sort of a wise mentor. Many of you know, I've said it on this channel before, one of my favorite movies is Good Will Hunting, and because I'm a native Bostonian, and I love the Bostonness of it. But if you think of Robin Williams' character Sean McGuire in that movie, he's a very Chiron type character. Someone who's helping Matt Damon learn how to contain and heal some of the stuff that's happened to him, how to channel his energy. This is a very Chiron Aries idea too, where he's helping him heal traumas and wounds from his past, but also helping him to focus his energy and not feel like his energy has control of him all the time. And Robin Williams, we know in that movie, is deeply wounded. I'm sorry if this is a spoiler, but if you haven't seen this movie, you need to reprioritize your life. I'm just saying. It's an amazing movie. But his wife, who he loved deeply, died of cancer. Robin Williams in the movie, his wife, and it's a very deep cut. You can see it in him. You can see how much it's affected him. And there's some healing that he goes through in this movie as well, in order for him to be able to move on. But you can see it's something that will just be there. However much healing he does, wherever he goes, moving on, new relationships, new places in life, it will just be there. And so learning how to relate to those wounds in a way where we can use them to help, where we can use them to help ourselves, to be generous for ourselves, and use them to be a teaching for others. And even sometimes, what I think is interesting too is the methodologies that we learn while we're healing, sharing those as well. For instance, in my whole healing process, a lot of what I do today, I do because I learned it when I was doing my healing process. I did psychotherapy for many years. I'm not a psychotherapist, but in the process of doing therapy, I also did energy work. I got astrology readings. I had a whole bunch of stuff that I was doing that was helping me see into, heal, and reclaim aspects of myself that I felt I had lost. That's a big part of the archetype of Chiron. Now, Mercury, of course, complex archetypes that go with Mercury. Well, let's go with today's speech, communication, thought process. Those sorts of ideas, and we're gonna take that and merge these two ideas together and bring a little bit of Aries into it as well. So I'm going to do tried and true nightlight style 5 things to watch for with Mercury in interaction with Chiron. Speech that wounds versus speech that heals. Words, and I see this all the time as an energy worker, an energy practitioner. Words carry energy. Words not only carry the meaning we associate with them, the actual word carries a sort of frequency or an energy. And when we say sticks and stones can break my bones and words will never hurt me, that's not true. Words can be very harmful. In fact, words can really stick with us. The energy or the vibration of that word or the interaction with that word or what was said can stick with us for a very long time. When Mercury is coming into conjunction with Chiron and Aries, there may be a call for us to notice what wounds have harmed us, maybe what words we've used that have harmed others, and how we can then find speech and communication that would feel healing for that. Because the amends we make in communication can also carry an energy. And even if someone doesn't accept the amends, they're just not in a place where they can accept, when we go to them and say like, hey, I really fucked up, I'm sorry. just the act of making the amends, of being sincere about it, begins to change the energy of the words involved. It begins to change the frequency, so to speak, of the energetic interaction between us and another. And maybe when someone comes to us too, sometimes people come to us and, they realize, they're like, wow, I really screwed up. And sometimes we're ready to accept that, and sometimes we're not. And they'll say, a lot of times, I remember years ago when someone said to me, I realized what I said really hurt you, and it did, and I wasn't ready to take to reconcile at that point, but it did soften the energy around it quite a bit, and it did set me forth on a path where I was able to eventually move forward from that interaction. But I think that looking for how we're speaking, how we're thinking, how we're communicating, what we're putting into the world, is it healing or is it harmful? Aries communication often has to do with direct, incisive, Aries communication at its best, direct, incisive, mission driven speech that works to rebalance something with a sense of fairness, a sense of justice, whether that's collective or internal or interpersonal. So you might look for that around this time, as like, someone coming to you and saying like, hey, I messed up, or you really feeling like, what, I did not act with integrity in that conversation, or I said something in a blaze of anger that was mean or cruel, and I need to own up to that, and turning the wound into something that becomes generative and healing. And sometimes, some of the most healing interactions we can have when a trust or something is really ruptured, and we're able to at least work towards a softening around that, if not a full reconciliation. Sometimes we can't work to full reconciliation, and that's okay. But in that process, we reclaim ourselves back from the past. And that's a huge, huge part of the archetype of Aries, is reclaiming back from the past. Now, let me take a sip of my cafe.
Wow, this guy's fucking really good.
All right. Next is second thing to look for is reclaiming our voice from our wounds. There's one of my favorite movies is The King's Speech with Colin Firth, and I think it's Elena Bonham Carter plays his wife, the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth. And there's if you haven't seen this, it's basically chronicling King George VI of England working with his speech coach, because he had a very profound stutter for much of his life. And there's a point where his coach gets him to such a place where he just screams, "I have a voice." You can hear it. And just, all of a sudden, like, the resonance of his voice changes. It drops. It becomes lower. It becomes powerful. It becomes commanding. It's a very kind of Leo moment, or Aries and Leo share that the exaltation and the rulership of the sun, right? That idea of sovereignty, the king, the queen, the ruler, the sovereign of a country or a place. And there's a reclamation that happens in that moment. I pull back from the wounds that they talk about in the movie. There's some of the wounds in his childhood. I pull back my voice to myself. I have a voice. I have something to say. This is Aries. I have something to speak. I have a point of view. I get to express that point of view. All Aries. That could also go too far, where it's like, I have something to say and it's the only thing to say, and it's the right thing to say. I'm just saying, this is fire sign. A lot of fire in my chart. Fire signs, let's own up. We can be like that. Right? Oh man, I am a Sagittarius. It's not an opinion, it's a total fact. I just said it, and that makes it a fact. Anyways, so looking for that, reclaiming your voice, as we do healing work, as we go on those journeys, as we work with others, we work within community, we work within our relationships, we can draw back to ourselves our voice, our ability to express, our ability to have a point of view, our ability to state what is good for us or right for us and what is not. And that can be a very powerful, very, very powerful moment when that happens. You can feel it kind of like in that movie that it drops. Your voice suddenly becomes much more emphatic and powerful. Okay. Teaching from our wounds of self. One of the things that Chiron does in myth is he becomes a teacher. He's a teacher of arts that have, whether they affected him personally or not, they have a profound effect. They've not helped his healing or not. They've had a profound effect. our wounds oftentimes create, fair or not, things we learn. Sometimes it's not fair or right that we had to learn them. And I don't always get like, I don't always subscribe to the idea of like, because this horrible thing happened, there was a meaning and it was to teach you how to teach it. I don't subscribe to that at all. Nevertheless, when things happen, and sometimes things happen, the meaning we make about it and our ability to share from that meaning can be very healing, a big part of the healing process. And so teaching from our wounds of self, when I'm training yoga teachers, that's a big part of what I did, and still do to some degree, was train yoga teachers for many, many years. And oftentimes in yoga classes, people will share from their experiences. And I always tell them, like, you're welcome to share as much as you'd like, or you are welcome to share as much as you would not like to share. Um, but our experiences have value. And oftentimes, when you can share to somebody's experience from your own, even if you don't communicate the exact thing that happened, right? Sometimes there are certain things that we want to keep private to ourselves, but what we learned from it, we communicate. There's a transmutation of the energy in that interaction. The frequency of that energy shifts, and it moves towards something where we can feel we're of service, we're giving, we're generous, and it's of assistance to others. And that can be really healing in of itself. We can't always get there right away, and I'm not sure we can always get there with everything. And it's okay if that's not where you are right now. But just knowing that I found that, at least I'll say from my own personal experience, I found that to be a very powerful idea. When I've shared the things that I've learned, right or wrong, whether I should have had to or not. And again, some things I think just happen. I'm not a subscriber to everything happens for a reason, especially the really bad stuff. But that there's something within that, right? Where for my healing, for me going forward with my life, me reclaiming Aries, 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 it allows me to go forward. It allows me to feel like I'm healing. It allows me to feel like I'm able to be of service. It brings not only healing to others, but to myself. It's a beautiful, it can be very, very beautiful. Meaning making from our wounded self. This is number 4. It may be the same, but Chiron, the teacher of philosophy, the way we order things, the way we order the world, the way we order thought, the way we order things is very important as human beings. Whether you believe in I'm assuming if you're watching an astrology channel, you do not have this subscription to a random universe that just happened to come out of nowhere, that sort of thinking. But maybe you do. I don't know, and that's totally fine. But in some way, we're always making meaning as human beings. You'll hear that all the time. We're meaning making machines, and making meaning can be very helpful. Maybe we're all making meaning with all of this, right? We're making meaning out of the sky, out of the earth, out of ourselves. I heard Jill Tarter, the famous scientist who is the movie Contact, with Jodie Foster's character is based on her. She said once on a podcast, and it was so pithy and brilliant. She said, as humans, we're just fascinated by ourselves. And it's so true, right? We're always so interested in us, and the meaning we're making. And sometimes from our wounded self, the places that we know, we've done work with, we've seen, we've understood, we've tended to, the parts around them that we've healed, the young parts of ourselves or the younger parts, or the parts that experienced it. There's some meaning we can make. There's a life philosophy that can come out of it. Now, one thing's interesting that with Chiron, and I see this often around the Chiron return, which happens for us around 4950. We can make meaning out of our wounds that causes us to shrink and retreat. Sometimes that happens. They're so overwhelming. It's like I just shrink and retreat back into myself. Or we can make meaning that is generous and shares. I'm not giving a value judgment on either one. In the work that I've done and what I've heard some people go through, I'm like, I am not going to offer judgment on how anyone handles their own internal state. That's kind of between you and God. But the idea of knowing what kind of meaning we're making, and is this a meaning that's reclaiming, Aries, reclaiming, pulling back, drawing back from the past, that's a discernment that'll be really interesting around this time, especially as Mercury's making that pass on April 15th, the retrograde pass. That'll put that, usually when Mercury's making the retrograde pass at an aspect like that, That's when you're sort of you're bringing up the stuff to be seen and discerned. Cool. All right, so another sip of coffee. There we go. Saying no. Oh, number 5, saying no. Speaking up to unnecessary sacrifice. Chiron, when it's strong in the chart, often there's a very strong self-sacrificial quality to it, especially when we're not aware of the archetype at work. And there's a feeling of it really doesn't matter what happens to me. I just think about others. I'm so, you know, sometimes, especially for those of us that are very empathically sensitive, I'm very empathically sensitive in a lot of ways. We can confuse compassion with empathic entanglement, where we're so involved in the experience of another that it's hard for us to locate ourselves in that interaction. And when we can step back, there's a sense of genuine compassion where I'm centered, rooted in myself, and I'm able to take action that is effective and helpful and necessary for what needs to be done in the service of another. When we say no to unnecessary sacrifice, because there's some necessary concessions and compromises and so forth that we go through in our adult lives, particularly, there's a sense of, again, that reclaiming, where we say it's important that I stay centered in my sense of who I am and have an eye towards a mission or a drive towards the service of others. And when we get lost in that, when we get lost on that internal compass, then it's very hard to discern what is necessary and where we end and someone else begins. And remember that Mars will be in Pisces, ruling all of these planets during that time, which will maybe bring some of that soup to the surface of like, well, where exactly are the boundaries here? How much am I giving? Is it actually helpful? Um, and maybe looking at, is my speech and communication, or my actions of my words, the actions of my words, the actions of my communication really helpful here? Am I centered in my own sense of self? And not in an egotistical way, because you can do that. Trust me, this could also go in the shadow side, an egotistical way. Like, I am centered in myself and I'm good. I don't give a fuck what happens to anybody else. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is I have a sense of being inside myself. And let me put it this way: when I'm teaching people about energy work, and especially when they're doing altered states of consciousness, in whatever way, you actually have to have a fairly strong, healthy ego to do that. You have to have a space to return to where feels like you. Because when you shift and change, when I do readings, right, when I'm sort of like in one space here and then communicating to my client here, I have to be very clear about where I am, what I'm seeing, and not getting too involved in it. That was a big thing that happened to me in my early career when I was doing intuitive work, was I would get so involved and drawn into the experience that I wouldn't know where I was. I would feel kind of disoriented. When we're stable and grounded in ourselves, then we're able to draw in. We're able to go more places when we're stable and grounded in ourselves. It's a little bit like having an internal lighthouse. I can go a little further from the shore when I know that there's a beacon on the shore that draws me back. I hope that makes sense. So that keeps us from a space of being unnecessarily sacrificial, because it's like I'm going out here, but I know where I am. I'm aware of things that could be helpful, or I'm also aware of where I'm trying to help, but it's actually not helpful. That could be something that happens with Chiron too. I'm really trying to help. My intentions are good, but it doesn't seem to wind up the way I thought it would. That could also happen too. I'm saying something I think should be helpful here, but it's actually having the opposite effect. When we're centering ourselves, more often than not, though we all mess it up sometimes, we speak from a place, we communicate from a place that is maybe not always comfortable, but more helpful. Yeah. Oh, my goodness, that is some Mercury and Chiron. And I like to do this to my chair, but I forgot I have a headrest on this new chair. So just like going backwards. Anyways, I hope this was helpful, friends. I hope it was a helpful introduction to Chiron and some of the ideas you might see. It may be interesting for you to look at your chart if you don't know where it is already, to take a look, add the point to the chart, see where it is in your natal chart, see if you're having any major transits to Chiron. And you might notice some of these themes come up too, with the combination of whatever planet the archetype is moving with Chiron. But yeah, this was really fun to do. I hope you have enjoyed, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for sticking around. I'm really happy to be joined by my wife Ashley, who is an herbalist. Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
And yeah, I'm really excited to be helping. It's easy to forget how magical the transit really is. So that's what we're going to refresh ourselves on today with this passage from Liz Green. Now, when you see the sun here, this is today, Friday, March 15th. We're going to take this forward, and voila, they conjoin by early Sunday morning, March 17th. So you spread this out, give it a few days, and you've got about yesterday, Thursday, March 14th, and then we'll give them about 3 degrees of separation to about Wednesday, March 20th. But you'll really notice it Saturday and Sunday this weekend, the 16th and 17th of March. So, on that note, they are in the double bodied water sign of Pisces. In modern astrology, where outer planets have been assigned rulerships, not a convention that I follow, but for those who do, Neptune is, of course, quite at home in Pisces. And so that's an interesting little tidbit because the the watery sign of Pisces is sometimes associated with Neptune in our minds in modern astrology. Anyway, so what I want to do now, I'm going to read. It's reading hour. I'm going to read you a passage on Neptune and the Sun that made such an impact on me that I revisit this probably 10 to 15 times a year in my own study and practice. And I've actually had clients come in where if they're going through a Neptune Sun transit to their birth chart, Neptune transiting the Sun in their birth chart, I will often share a little excerpt from this passage because I think it's so profound. Now, this is, in about three to 3.5 pages, and I'm going to pause as we go to offer you my own little commentary. But Liz Green says it better than I ever could, so we'll mostly defer to her, but I'm going to add in some of my own thoughts here. She starts off, when Neptune is connected with the Sun, the need for individual self-expression and the longing for the formlessness of pre-birth are forced into dialogue. The subject of the conversation, conscious or unconscious, is the purpose of one's life. So for thousands of years, the sun has been associated with that sense of purpose that gives our life something like a narrative arc. Okay, so in modern astrology, we often say, "What's your sun sign?" Right? As in, what's your sign? For ancient astrologers, the rising sign and the ruling planets and the planets in the first house, sometimes the moon, were more indicative of character and temperament and psychology. Whereas the sun was really describing something like the archetypal domain of life that defines one's sense of purpose. Okay, so it's really important to make that distinction because Liz Green makes the similar distinction. Insofar as our ego is rooted in some sense of purpose, there is definitely a connection with our character, but it's important to think of the sun as a kind of narrative arc. The Sun and Neptune are uneasy bedfellows, and it generally takes at least until the time of the first Saturn return for the individual to begin to fathom how to live with this disturbing cohabitation. Now, she's speaking there about people who have it natally. That it is possible is suggested by the Greeks, who coupled the two gods in their joint shrine at Delphi, presenting the worshiper with an alternating rhythm of solar clarity and chthonic ecstasy, each with its own part of the year set aside for the appropriate rituals. Now, that's another little important tidbit because when she mentions that there is a kind of unification between these two gods in the Greek imagination, it's important to understand what they each represented and how such a synthesis of the two gods is possible. So, presenting the worshiper with an alternating rhythm of solar clarity and chthonic ecstasy. One of the words, the word chthonic, a simple way of putting it is that it means that it's more like ocean and earth, and with the word chthonic, you often get the feeling of something very earthy and almost like, I would use the word pagan in a very respectful way, even in an honoring way, like a rich pagan kind of feeling, but it's earthy and sensual, and it's a little chaotic and magical. The chthonic, the solar clarity is more like the sense of enlightenment that you get sitting on a rock in a loincloth, you know, like just meditating and connecting with the transcendental ground of being. Right? That's the solar clarity. Well, that's what makes the pairing of the two a little bit difficult, is that you have these two gods, one that represents going down and in, and the other one that represents going up and out. In fact, the sign of Pisces connects the two fish whose tails are tied together in some images, with the one fish going upward and eastward, there's the solar clarity, and the other one going downward and westward, down toward the earth, which is the chthonic ecstasy. So that duality is actually present in Pisces, which is why we get sometimes, like, what is the image, for example, of trying to escape the pain of the world through drugs? It's a complicated image, not just one that we can write off by saying, oh, that's an addict or something. Well, there's certainly addiction there, right? And that can be a disease and a real problem. But the desire to transcend the world, to transcend pain and suffering, is very solar, to go up to the top of the mountain. Whereas the use of something that's very worldly, that eventually entangles you more deeply in the world, in the body, in addiction, to a material substance, that also offers a kind of sensual, embodied, but temporary high. That's the chthonic ecstasy, a shadow of the chthonic ecstasy. So drug addiction is a complicated image that is actually at the heart of some of the archetype of Pisces as a sign. So anyway, that solar clarity and chthonic ecstasy, this is why we see Neptune as not badly placed in the sign of Pisces as an archetypal association. Because the sun symbolizes those values and goals which develop at midlife, forming the bedrock of an individual's sense of personal destiny, the Sun Neptune individual needs to include the Neptunian world in his or her chosen path in life. Otherwise, nagging discontent, disillusionment, and apathy may undermine everything one tries to do. So when the Sun Neptune comes through, there is this nagging sense, if your life is not inclusive of something transcendental, otherworldly, ecstatic, and infused with a sense of higher or transcendental ideal, an ideal that gives you purpose and meaning, there'll be this nagging sense of discontentment, disillusionment, or boredom that can kind of surface. And that's something to watch for this weekend, too. All the aspects, hard and soft, require some expression of the pre-birth realm through an individually developed medium, preferably but not necessarily one which can be pursued as a vocation or profession. Including the Neptunian world might be simple. All one has to do, apparently, is think transcendent thoughts. But the sun is a dynamic force which seeks to express and actualize. It must radiate out into life and make some impact, however small, in the outer world. If the person is to avoid the illusory comfort of an escapist spirituality, he or she must find a vehicle that offers an outlet for Neptune's sensual and emotional theatricality, as well as its longing for fusion with the divine. Most importantly, this vehicle must be individual. Doctrines, however beautiful and worthwhile they might seem, are not individual unless they are processed through one's own experience and values. So you can't sign up for transcendental meditation and think that that's enough. I love TM, but you can't sign up for a yoga program or an astrology program or any kind of program and think that that's enough. There's a way in which the Sun Neptune requires that the transcendental or spiritual or imaginative or artistic impulses be channeled through the very essence of your being, that it be so personal, and that it be that purpose comes through a marriage of something transcendental, ideal, which maybe has religious and spiritual themes or elements. It's not like you can't go to yoga or you can't learn astrology or you can't meditate or something to get there, but it has to be personal. And that's the sense that, many Sun Neptune transits will result in a person feeling like they found something otherworldly, but in the end, the glitter wears off because there was something about it that left out the individual uniqueness of the soul, the character. And that's, by the way, that is not so different from saying that it leaves out the chthonic, the realm of the earth, because the soul, as opposed to the spirit, the kind of dyad of our being, the spirit connects with the transcendent, but the soul is rich and deep and sort of earthly. It is bound up in idiosyncrasies and uniqueness. And so you can't, like, the call for something greater, if it eliminates individuality, which often these various, spiritual programs they will sort of erase individuality, and you'll just be eye gazing into infinity with people. It was it was always something that annoyed me about the New Age world when I was in it more intensely. Oh my God! All right. Anyway, you need individuality. So if the person is to avoid the illusory comfort of an escapist spirituality, you must find a vehicle that offers an outlet for Neptune's sensual, emotional, spiritual theatricality. It's longing for fusion with divine, but it has to be individual. It's very important, right? This is why the same exact transit of Sun Neptune will often be associated with people when they become disillusioned or disappointed with or disenchanted with something in their life that maybe offers something, something that you've bought into, or that you've become deeply identified with, but that has also sort of diminished your sense of individuality. You'll start recognizing it. Like, whoa. Sun Neptune may signify the musician, the actor, the composer, the playwright, the writer of poetry and fiction, the painter, the filmmaker, the photographer, the astrologer, the experimental scientist who relies on inspiration as well as empirical research, or the therapist, counselor, or teacher who works with the products of imagination in order to heal. Neptune may also feel at home nurturing or redeeming an environment which echoes Eden. Neptune's empathy with human suffering and longing marks the Sun Neptune's individual's creative endeavors with a quality of universality. He or she can communicate in a language everyone understands. These forms of expression are solar as well as oceanic. They have body, although they are fluid. They necessitate conscious effort, dedication, individual choice, sensual contact and imagery, and a subtle interrelationship with the rest of life. Neptune makes the sun ego porous, open to the waters of the unseen world. But the unseen is not just transcendent light, it is also primal darkness. If one tries to befriend the little fish without the big one, the darkness may rise up through other channels: alcohol, drug addiction, compulsive eating disorders, sexual difficulty, disabling or disintegrating mental or physical illness, or it may be experienced through projection, and by some blackly humorous quirk of fate, one's partner or child will embody all the murky or Neptunian elements that one most strongly repudiates within oneself. So here she's basically saying that there's all of these beautiful Sun Neptune endeavors that you'll find are common in the charts of people with Sun Neptune, or during Sun Neptune transits. You'll see them manifest. The counselor, the healer, the artist, all of these things that are so beautiful. They're truly like so inspiring. Sun Neptune is lovely in that respect. However, the solar clarity without the chthonic ecstasy, which the earth is a complicated place. It's a place of desire and fear and competition and hostility and pain and impermanence and suffering, as well as tremendous beauty, right? And compassion and forgiveness. So, but the earth, you cannot, like, you cannot paint a rosy picture of the earth and try to cast it all in golden light. If you do that, then the repression of the chthonic, of the complicated realm of the Sun Neptune, which involves the urges and impulses of the of nature, of the jungle of life. If you try to eliminate those, they will come up in some way. And they will often come up as, oh, I'm in a religious group, but the guru is molesting me. I mean, this is real. That sounds terrible, but this is real Sun Neptune talk here. You will find that to the extent that your spirituality is glazed over, your ego has become identified with Neptune to the extent that I'm so spiritual, I'm a healer, nothing is wrong here, there's no complications. Or you look at the complications of the world and you see them as stains or sinful or bad, or there's a judgment about them, to the extent that you repudiate those things rather than developing the complex relationship that's needed with them. It's a complex relation. It's like what's your relationship status with the chthonic world of Earth? It's complicated, right? That's the status. If you leave that out, The Sun Neptune person like Pentheus may initially succeed in banning the chthonic, but may end up marrying a manic depressive, hysteric, and alcoholic, giving birth to a little Dionysus who becomes a drug addict when he grows up. Better to develop a difficult, complicated appreciation for the chthonic realm than try to repudiate it. The individual with Sun Neptune longs to experience being taken out of himself or herself through a voluntary act of submission to something greater or higher. So she goes on. I'm going to skip the next part a little bit here. If the sun is swamped, because she goes on for a little bit about stuff that's not super relevant for us. If the sun is swamped, then individuality can only make itself known through covert channels, symptoms which justify one's unconscious demand to be noticed, or a relationship pattern in which one's specialness is measured by the degree of victimization suffered at the hands of a selfish and domineering partner, child, parent, or friend. So the extent to which we identify with saving or helping people, eventually with Sun Neptune, it comes around to bite us, because there'll be a way in which we're constantly diminishing our own value or worth, and then the Sun Neptune becomes all about needing to set boundaries. If you can follow that, that's one great Sun Neptune pattern. If Neptune is suppressed, symptoms reflecting one's own helplessness and dependency may appear, or one may be repeatedly drawn to those who are themselves helpless and victimized, and one may experience an intolerable longing for something unknown and unseen, a longing for dissolution which can only be satisfied by an act of what older astrology textbooks call self-undoing. See, if we're like repressing Neptune, then often Sun Neptune will come up as overwhelm, confusion, feeling lost, feeling in need of help, feeling helpless, needing to rely on the forgiveness, charity, compassion of other people, because we've been so self-centered and so self-reliant that we have forgot that we are a dependent being connected with the web of being. And that's a Sun Neptune thing as well. It can be very healing. The personal father. Now she goes on to talk about the father figure, which is also important for Neptune Sun. The personal father melded with the archetypal father is a symbol for every child's sense of confidence and creative power. This is why we expect so much from our fathers, who will inevitably get it wrong in one way or another because they are mortal. It is also why the sun in the horoscope seems to personify what has been inherited from the father as part of the raw material of one's own individual destiny. Notice she says destiny, not character. The mythic hero's quest is invariably the externalization of an attribute embodied by his parent god. Any planet aspecting the sun points to a particular facet of the father archetype, which it is the individual's task to confront and express as creatively as possible. The Neptunian father is the dismembered Orpheus or the wounded Grail King, rendered impotent by life's harshness or by his own burden of human sin. The internalized father figure provides the rudiments of a sense of purpose, just as the internalized mother provides the rudiments of an instinctive trust in life. The Neptunian father is a spirit who has not embodied himself in life, and his child is left to find his or her own model for confident living. It is not surprising that many Sun Neptune individuals take a long time to do so. Now, she's talking about dad karma. There's also something to be said about Sun Neptune contacts with fathers who are incredibly compassionate or spiritual or imaginative. So it's not all bad. But she's certainly talking about the shadows to watch for. There are often considerable creative potentials inherited from the father. I have met many Sun Neptune people whose fathers were talented actors, musicians, writers, and painters, although frequently these fathers could not make their talents work in outer life, or abandon their gifts, or never express them at all once they embarked upon marriage and fatherhood. The individual with Sun Neptune may pay for this dreamer father with a gnawing internal sense of impotence. Sooner or later, they will have to develop self-confidence from scratch, because the father perhaps did not offer a strong enough example. So again, like she's talking about how the Sun Neptune contacts in a natal chart can activate various shadows or challenges that arise from the connection to the patterns in one's father. But I will add, as someone who's seen tons of charts and people with Sun Neptune over time, in many cases, Sun Neptune contacts will show people whose fathers offered some very ideal sense of romantic, artistic, imaginative, spiritual sensibilities, and that will serve as a source of inspiration for the individual. And at the same time, sometimes there is a way in which Sun Neptune contacts will suggest that you need to individuate and figure out who you are relative to this very beautiful and inspiring image that the Father created. So it's not always that the Father is just a kind of failure, imaginative, spiritual, artistic, kind of like talented, but maybe unrealized or something, which is definitely a shadow, but also that the sun Neptune is such a strong example at times that it's hard to differentiate yourself and figure out who you're going to be. As someone with some Neptune contacts in my chart, I was, like I grew up, for example, with a father who was in many ways, a really great example of a spiritual figure, and figuring out how I wanted to take from that, but create my own thing has been that's been a real source of challenge at times. That's just as common as the idea that there's some, like, your dad's like Sun Neptune, your dad's an alcoholic, or Sun Neptune, your dad's inspired but not able to translate his gifts into the real world or something, which are shadows. But Liz Green, I don't think, goes far enough to talk about the positive ways in which Sun Neptune can leave this inspiring mark on a person. And it's not just father either. Sun Neptune comes about in the sky like it is this weekend at any point when there are people who are really inspiring as examples of what we can be, or examples of a life filled with purpose that we admire, that we want to take after. And yet the challenge may be there to define for ourselves what that looks like, because Sun Neptune, again, will require that anything ideal, transcendental, inspired, mystical, imaginative still has to be personal. We can't just copy something. We have to realize what our own source of creative inspiration looks like. So anyway, that is it. I wanted to just share a few little parts from that excerpt. I highly recommend you guys check this book out if you want to read a fantastic book about Neptune. The Astrological Neptune and the Quest for Redemption by Liz Green is one of my all-time favorite books on Neptune. The entire Center for Psychological Astrology series, the CPA series, is really good, including that book. So maybe you guys can check that out. That is it for today. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I would love to hear your stories. If you have a story to share, use the hashtag grabbed, or email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Tell us how the Sun and Neptune showed up in your life this weekend. And don't forget that you can get the replay on nightlightastrology.com of the Neptune in Love talk that we did last night. And you can also hop over to skyhouseherbs.com to learn more about Ashley's apprenticeship after I sign off. You can stick around if you'd like to hear the interview that I did with Ashley about her upcoming herbal apprenticeship program. That is it for today. Hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you again next week. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for sticking around. I'm really happy to be joined by my wife, Ashley, who is an herbalist. Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
And yeah,
Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and I hope you're all doing well out there. I'm recording this from sunny Luxor in Upper Egypt. At the moment, I'm right at the end of a really long visit to Egypt. I've been here for several weeks now. Looking forward to getting back home, making some more content, but I've got something a little different for you all today. Not like my regular produced content. This is actually a walkthrough of the incredible Assyrion, the subterranean structure that's found at the back of the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, which is also here in Upper Egypt. I really wanted to do a live stream while I was at the site. If you saw, I put out a community post saying I was going to try and live stream, but unfortunately there really isn't enough cellular bandwidth to be able to do that. I could barely get a single megabit of upload speed out of the phone, so instead I recorded a walkthrough. I really hope you enjoy this. I had a little bit of private time, I guess, in the Assyrion before the rest of the group showed up for our private permission access into the site. Have a bit of a chat and some interaction with Yusuf, also Russ and Kyle from the Snake Bros, and then stick around to the end of the video. I've got some interesting new perspectives, I guess, and we got into some spots that gave me some new data, if you like, on the Assyrion, and I'll share those at the end of the walkthrough. I'll also probably drop in and out with a couple of little edits and comments as we go through it. And as always, a massive thank you to all of the channel supporters, patrons, and everybody else who supports my work through that value for value model. I couldn't do this without your help and support. And if you're interested in that, please do check out my website. It's unchartedx.com/support. I hope you enjoy the walkthrough, and I'll catch you in the next one.
All right, try this again. Here we are at the Assyrian in Abydos, Upper Egypt. I would have loved to live stream here. I tried. The bandwidth is just too bad. Too poor. Not enough to live stream, but I'm going to try and record this. I did this once already. My phone overheated, so I took it out of its case, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, so this is at the back. You find this at the back of the Temple of Seti I, which is this structure up here. You can see it's me. I'll flip the phone around real quick. Hello. Here at the Assyrian. And yeah, remarkable structure that was most likely discovered during the time of construction of the temple. And it's an entirely different style and at an entirely different level to the architecture that we find in the Temple of Seti I, who was the ruler of the 19th dynasty. And obviously his son Ramses II and then his son Merenptah have their names throughout the temple. Also in parts of this structure, actually. Although not Ramses II, funnily enough. The Seti I is named in here, and then Merenptah also at some point got in here and did this. But there are two accesses into the Assyrian. One is all the way around the back. You walk past the remediation wells, although you see these wells here are also part of the system used to pump the water out. There are more wells over this hill, so you walk all the way around, and then you can access this via this long sloping tunnel. You see the roof of it just here. I'm looking at my screen. I'm aiming with my eye and I should be looking through the screen. And this is all made, this may well have been dynastic when it was created. It's full of engravings and hieroglyphs. And it was Flinders Petrie and his associated it right down to pretty much the end part of it here. And they documented everything that happened. And then they couldn't get any further. In fact, this circular tunnel here, that's this like brick construction that you can see. Maybe I'll zoom in on it. This stuff here is a relatively modern construction. At least these days, it's 150 years old. But this was done by, I think, Petrie, if not Professor Edward Neville, who was the real guy who actually really excavated this entire structure in and around 1914 was when he finished, but he had been working in years prior to that here in the Assyrian as well. And he talked about it, you know, they didn't know where they were going. They had there was this huge lump of debris and rubble because Petrie, when he was excavating the temple, had dumped everything out on top of this area. So you can imagine all of this was covered in dirt. And then sand and all the rubble and the excavations from the temple were dumped on here. So they had to move all of that out the way as they were getting in under here. And then they had the idea, all right, they need to clear it down from the top and start to get into it. Because there were some open chambers and passages. There are some, like the ceiling blocks here. And they kept seeing what they thought were doorways, but it was just really gaps between the columns that they got into, and they were crawling in this space. And eventually he removed all of the sand out of here and revealed it. And Neville in his paper called it the Great Pool and the Tomb of Osiris. So it's just monstrous construction. I mean, there's these huge cyclopean granite blocks that make up the structure of the central island and of the Assyrian, and also the floor blocks are all granite. And then it's lined in these quartzite blocks, and then behind that is limestone. Fairly roughly worked. You can see the limestone over there. And then there's the quartzite blocks on the walls. And then you have all these granite pillars and blocks and beams that are everywhere else. Obviously, a lot of this is now modern reconstruction or modern retaining walls. And in fact, you can see up here this cement wall. There's this huge 10 or 15 meter cement wall that's been sunk down as a retaining wall to stop sort of the hill from coming this way into the Assyrian. But quite clearly not part of the temple construction. I think it's highly likely that when this temple was being made, they had to dogleg it to the left in order to avoid the Assyrian when they probably discovered it. And even Edward Neville, in his writings about the Assyrian, suggested that it might be the oldest building in Egypt altogether, which is kind of hard to imagine, given that if this is the first try at making a building, it's quite spectacular. But he definitely dates it as being, well, it matches the stonework and the masonry that you see in places like the Sphinx Temple or the Valley Temple, although it's much larger. Like the actual granite blocks here are bigger than what you see in those places. And he dates it as being, you know, potentially Old Kingdom, or he even says, even in 1914, that it may well be pre-dynastic. But this entire structure is actually an island. You can see here this granite. There's water that runs all around the edge of it. The ceiling spans the gap, but it's actually built on top of an island. The whole thing is built on top of a very specific small aquifer, or a natural spring that comes from somewhere, and it pushes up water into here. And it's not Nile water that comes in here, although it may well be connected to the Nile, and we can talk about that too. Strabo is another guy who talked about this particular space, or we think he was talking about this space, and he describes it as having a canal that also connected it to the Nile. So I've removed the magical rope barrier here, and you can see the water level's a lot lower than it has been in the past. They've been actively pumping the water out here. They've been doing a lot of work removing all the big blocks that used to be in these channels, and they've shifted them out the back, so they're cleaning this up. And I've been talking with the guy who is responsible for all the excavation work happening here now, and they say they have plans to remove all of the mud. So you can see the sediment level, but they want to pump all of that out. And obviously you can see the granite blocks that are still stuck in the channels everywhere. These are all remnants from quarrying and later activities. But even when Neville was here, he was here during a particularly dry year, so the water table level had dropped. And when they excavated down, they got down about 4 meters below the level of the platform, and you could see, you know, you could see it down. There's actually old photographs from that period and that excavation, and he estimated that it might have been another 4 meters beyond that, so 8 meters. But we know now from more modern explorations that it's actually much deeper than that. 5 or 6 stories, 30 meters plus. We don't really know, because every time people have tried to probe the bottom and get through the muck and find out where does this go, you end up hitting water pressure that's being pushed up from this aquifer, and it really messes with these stick readings. And there's all these different readings for how deep the water actually goes here. We're not quite sure.
Future Ben here. After I recorded this walkthrough, I was chatting with the lead archaeologist.
Thank you for being here. I think on this first day of spring. I think
pulling out all of the blocks,
around first day of springish.
Excavations, and I asked him
in the
about
northern
the depth
hemisphere.
of the Assyrian, and he told me 21 meters was the depth. So, in lieu of any other past experiments or all the other reports that I've seen, I'm just going to go with his figure for 21 meters, which is really quite a remarkable depth when you consider that entire island.
Good stuff. We're going to read somebody.
And, you know, hopefully when they do remove all of the mud and the water, we'll actually be able to get down there and see all of these constructed blocks and maybe find out if there are chambers or if there is anything else below the surface.
So hopefully in the future, in the not too distant future, they'll clear this out and we'll actually get to the bottom of this. But this is constructed, so the entire island, you're standing on top of a huge megalithic construction here. Like, these are all blocks, and in the pictures we have, and from what we know, there are constructed blocks that go down much, much further. And if it's anything like the construction work on top, I mean, these are cyclopean, massive granite blocks that have likely come from Aswan. You know, there's quartzite on the walls here has probably come from the Cairo region, the Red Mountain to the north of Cairo. So this stuff's come in from a long way away, and it's just immense. I mean, it's just it's hard to say until you're actually in here. Of course, it's been quarried, so you see a lot of the damage. You see the typical kind of wedge and chisel quarrying marks, say, on the top of this block here. We zoom in, you can see it up there. You can see more of them just here on this block. Over here, they tried to take a face off of this stone, and it didn't split evenly. It just took the chunk off the top. And Neville thinks that the excavation work was probably not particularly ancient. It might have even been the Coptic, so after the Romans and the Persians even. So it might have been Coptic Christian era quarrying. So the site